Yes, I have to express my concern, Madam Chair, that the proposed sale and leaseback of these buildings seems to be tied in with the proposed sale of port shares and airport shares. I have to say, in response to Member Tamahiri, given the times he interrupted debate during the annual plan discussions last week, that I'm reminded of the ruling of the Court of Appeal in relationship to his right to be at this table, let alone discussing asset sales.
Councillor Lee,
Our conclusion has obvious implications for Mr Tamahiri, since his appointment suffers from the same defect and that it was a consequence of an unlawful process.
Councillor Lee,
Thank you.
Disruptive.
Thank you.
why are you
Court of Appeal.
Order, order.
Councillor Lee, respect and good humour at all times, I would say.
It's not my
around
fault
here.
your missus run off and she's a...
It's okay. Thank you, Councillor Member Tamahiri.
It's uncalled for, Madam Chair, that type of behaviour, and it's a reflection on the Independent Māori Statutory Board as a whole. And that is not
Unlawful.
That has not had any finding other than a matter of view, and there was one person that the case was about. To retract that statement for what you were trying to imply there.
I'll read it. I'll read.
No, you won't, mate.
I'll read the Court of Appeal again if you like.
You won't.
Lee,
Ask him to leave, Madam Chair. That's just
any more of this, you can
really
leave the
bad.
chamber. Every meeting, if we've got Independent Maori Statutory Board meeting people here, you are out of order in your behaviour.
Not allowed to refer to court judgments, Councillor Lee.
You point out the standing order.
Not
Madam
the
Chair.
judgment.
You belong in Taranaki.
Thank you. Councillor Clow.
It's bad.
Gosh, I was
I feel like it
Follow
brings
that.
up too much.
fish in the entertainment. I'm assuming Central 1 Henderson has been left, because there's no great reason we're holding that, but I'm assuming we're holding that, we're not proposing it because of the Panuku development in Henderson. Is that tied in with that?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
Okay. And the civic building's not listed here.
It's a different issue, isn't it? It's in a
I
different
know
process.
it's a different issue, but
It's in a different process. I
There's a
think.
building we've got.
Yeah, through the chair, that's running through a separate process, so we've excluded that.
Okay. Now, just going down the track, just say we did sell these two buildings and there'll be a net gain. Does that money get counted as delivering Panuku's 67 million a year?
Through you, Madam Chair, no, Councillor Clow would not.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Other questions or comment, Councillor Cooper?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In terms of, you know, I just want to say around the whole EY Cameron Partners, when we looked at this, this was really, I can't see any link between this and any of the other issues around here, other than we had to look at other options. So, I mean, when you have elected members saying that there seems to be some tie-up between this and the port shares, they're nothing to do with each other. They're completely different options. They've got completely different processes around them, you know, and so I just want to make sure that's publicly noted that, you know, this is not linked, other than it's in a wider suite of options for us to raise revenue that isn't from the ratepayers, and that was the whole purpose of this review. So this is a highly sensible way of going about that. We're looking at it carefully. We're appointing some people to actually look at this and bring it back to us. We have to do this. We have to make sure that we're not putting everything on the ratepayers, and this is a really sensible option. You know, and it's well spelled out here. These buildings put forward are not public good buildings. We could do this work in any building, whether we own it or not. You know, we wouldn't be looking at selling the town hall, of course we wouldn't. This is a civic amenity, and that's a whole different ball game. So I'm really comfortable with us having this, and I'm really comfortable that we waited for a report that we had, everybody got the information together, and that we didn't have some people getting information over here, some people not getting it, and other people having an advantage over others. So I'm actually really comfortable that we waited to get a report, you know, that we had this put in front of us today, and then we'll get a further report about this further on. And I think that we all need to be on the same page, not having, you know, bits and pieces being trickled out. It's really important that we do this as a group together, and people will have different opinions about it, but at least we'll all have all the information at the same time as everybody else, and I think that is important and part of the process. So for me, I'm happy to second it, because I do want this to go ahead, and I do think we have to rationalise some of the buildings we've got. We've got far too many buildings, but I also want to ask that we fall down sometimes in basically having an overarching view of things. The way we try to build, for example, we're trying to build Westgate, and we've got all sorts of different processes bashing their heads against each other. There's no master plan there, and I want to make sure we're not doing this sort of process in a, you know, all over the place, using a whole lot of rules, and when you try to put them together, they don't work and they undermine each other. I think we have to have a view when we're looking at these sorts of processes. There's one group of people from all the different disciplines we need to look at this and also see how it affects everything else we do, because we do fall down in that in this council. When we want trying to do big stuff, we try to use the tools we already have and force them together, or have them working or operating separately, and it doesn't work. So I'm really keen to make sure that when we've done this, we haven't, a year down the track, we look back and go, oh my God, we actually needed that. So we need to be absolutely clear that if we're going to dispose of these, we've just investigated every option. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And I mean, you are right, and this is what Councillor Crum was asking for, but we aren't doing piecemeal, and anything will be coming back, and it's not, one is not tied up with the other. So the idea, you're right, that this is just the first step in selling the airport shares and selling the port shares and everything else is just nonsense. So this is to look at.
This is the second step.
This is to look at.
Diversified assets
Okay.
was last week.
Right. I'm going to. Oh, George, sorry. I had mine. Oh, did you? Okay. Right.
Madam Chair, I have listened to the discussion with interest. I have got real concerns about the portfolio of buildings that we actually own and also rent. And, you know, we had this issue in relation to the IT system and the new core and the redevelopment of our computer system. I also see that, you know, and what concerned me on that occasion was the fact that some CCOs didn't want to engage. They said, oh no, we're doing our own thing. So, and I thought that, you know, we could have got with scale, we could have done better, but I think those CCOs may be coming on board. But with our accommodation, it also does concern me in that area, and this report kind of, I know it doesn't allude to accommodation and the CCOs, but we do want to maximise the use of our buildings so that, you know, any investor that's going to look at them in the future will see that they are, you know, what the amount of use those buildings are getting. And, you know, in Manukau, we still have the same number of buildings we had prior to the, well, we've got those two big buildings in Manukau, which we had prior to the amalgamation in 2010. And now we hear that Auckland Transport's moving down into Fanshawe Street to the Vodafone Centre, taking over that building, which is a $3-something million a year rental. And, you know, people in Auckland are just wondering if we are actually making progress in banging heads together and making people realise that we are now one council. And, you know, you'd have Vodafone down there. I was very surprised when they actually moved into the HSBC building, number 1 Queen Street. Took a floor or a few floors down there. And now they're moving to the Vodafone Centre, which is a state-of-the-art building, only been open a few years, and Vodafone's only used it. Now the transport arm of council's moving there. So I think that if we're going to be looking at rationalisation and trying to sell down some of this asset, I think we've got to make sure that we've got the very best use across the council family, because it's the ratepayers that are paying to have all these buildings in use, and I think the ratepayers want to see us get the best return, including selling down the buildings to help in our desire to alleviate the debt. Because whatever people say, I think that people are pretty alarmed out there as the level of debt that this council has on its books from where we started in 2010. $5.5 billion it's gone up in the last 5 years. So, which will be the debt level the 30th of June next year. So I support this, but I think that it really needs an overall complex, comprehensive approach to this real complex issue. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Wood, because that's really what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
And the Manukau buildings are tied up with the development in Manukau, and there are reasons why each of these buildings, why some of them aren't in the list to be with this. Councillor Walker.
Sure. I'm supportive of looking at these two buildings and further investigating what the potential sale might be. Having said that, I am very concerned at the short-term way that we approach certainly what I'd call our civic administration, and I'm referring to the likely sale of the civic administration building, which many Aucklanders would regard as the part of the civic fabric of
Walker,
Auckland.
sorry, Councillor Walker,
Now,
this is not part of this report.
Madam Chair,
No,
Madam Chair, is this a point of order that you're raising? Because
No,
I suggest you're abusing your position as chairperson of this committee.
Councillor Walker, the civic building, as was pointed out a little earlier, is a separate process. If you want to ask about either of these buildings or any of the other buildings on the list, you may, as
Well,
part of this report.
my contention is that our approach to buildings across our portfolio, and I'm not simply referring to the council, but all of our CCOs, for example, Auckland Transport, is linked. My concern is that we do not have a long-term civic vision for this council in terms of our accommodation. We do not. Yet this council is something that will exist in perpetuity, long-term. Fine, let's sell 135 Albert Street because that isn't really tied in with our civic fabric. But we should have a long-term civic future for this administration, and I would suggest that the centre of that is this vicinity. The Civic Square, which is Aotea Square, and the buildings around it. And the buildings around it. And an integral part of that fabric is the Civic Administration building, which we are proposing to sell.
Thank you.
So I have an ongoing concern in that respect.
I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you very much, councillors. Moving on to...
No one against.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks,